Guys, the Traxxas Max Slash is here, and this thing looks absolutely awesome. In this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive into this, looking at everything that's new, seeing how fast this thing is on 6S, and taking it for a blast. If that sounds fun to you, stick around. First thing I want to take a look at is this body. I've got the rock and roll body here. It comes off with the same exact clip method as the Traxxas XRT, which just has 4 clips under the fenders. This body actually feels very, very sturdy. This plastic is nice and thick. It's thicker than I'm used to feeling on Traxxas bodies, and it's got this full internal cage, as well as braces on the sides that clip into the Nerf bars on the chassis. And it even has venting here in the back, which should help with parachuting. I'm not sure it's gonna help enough with parachuting to get up to the speeds that Traxxas claims, but we're gonna find out. We've got some nice little protectors on the back, and some skid plates on the top. Now taking a close look at this chassis, we've got a really nice, sturdy looking front bumper. That's gonna be attached to very similar shock towers that are on the Traxxas Max. The only real difference is the ability to mount the mounts for the body here. Moving down from there, we can see the servo saver, which is the same as the Max, and unfortunately that servo, which is plastic geared and the same as the Max. For $700, I'm not super thrilled about that. We also have a nice big battery compartment. This is basically the same battery compartment you get on the Sledge, and it has the same holes for pins to secure the clips. Moving around to the back, you can see we have the same shocks as the Traxxas Max. They do have different springs, and a nice big beefy rear bumper with a wheelie bar hiding out below it. These arms are different from the Traxxas Max. They're approximately the same length as the Traxxas Max V1, but they are different part numbers. I'm not sure exactly what's different with them. We'll be comparing them to the Traxxas Max arms in the future, but one thing you can see is they do have these little additional pieces in the back. Those pieces allow for more suspension droop in the back, which is the proper geometry for a vehicle like this. Now, as you can see, as opposed to the Max, we've got a nice flat chassis here, which should be really, really good for a low center of gravity. I've got some plans for this low center of gravity chassis, so if you want to see that, make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it. Let's go ahead and pull off one of these tires. In order to do that, we're going to need a tool. Traxxas does include a couple of basic tools, as well as a nice color instruction manual and some numbers you can put on your body. These are brand new belted tires for the Max Slash. They're 5.3 inches in diameter, and they do have that little washer in them, the same as the Max wheels. These tires do feel pretty slick out of the box, so we might have to do a little burnout on these to get this release compound out. The tires feel nice and thick, and they do definitely feel like they are belted. They do have 17mm hexes on the back, and that matches the 17mm hexes on these plastic axles. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute as well. As you can see here, everything looks very similar to the Traxxas Max, including those same threaded hinge pins that have not been upgraded on this model. I really would have liked to have seen the upgraded pins on this. The axle shafts look the same as on the Max, but there is a difference. Let's pull these apart and take a closer look. As you can see here, this looks very similar to what we're used to seeing on the stock Traxxas Max. However, Traxxas says that there is steel embedded inside these U's, which should strengthen this area. Hopefully it'll stop them from coming apart. That being said, you should be able to upgrade these with the V1 Max steel drive shafts, which I'm going to be doing in the future, so make sure you stay tuned for that. And as you can see, this hub, knuckle, and steering setup is very familiar if you've ever had a Traxxas Max. Moving back up to the top, we can see we have the same VXL6S system as in the Traxxas Sledge, including the same motor. You can see there's a lot more room down there underneath it because of this low center of gravity chassis. One thing I have been getting mixed information about is whether or not we've got a steel or plastic spur gear in here. Let's take a look. All right, so as you can see, we have a sintered steel spur gear in here. That's really nice to see. I was worried it was going to have the plastic gear off the Max. This was a really good upgrade. Unfortunately, they didn't upgrade the motor mount, which is okay as long as you're using the pin system, but if you start running gears that can't utilize the pin system, which in case you didn't know is basically any gears other than the Traxxas gears, you might run into problems with this motor mount not staying put, and you might have to upgrade it. The receiver box should look very familiar. It's straight off the Traxxas Max. There's a TQI receiver in there, and to go along with that, we get the venerable TQI remote. If you've had a Traxxas vehicle in the last decade and a half, you'll be familiar with this. It's fine, but it would be nice to see an update at some point. Now, most of the rest of the drivetrain is identical to the Max. However, there is a new center differential hiding in here. I'd like to take a look at that and see what's different. First step to getting to that is taking off this new center skid plate. And we've got to pull this rear skid off as well. Underneath that, we have a new center drive shaft, though strangely Traxxas doesn't seem to have a part number for this. This has to be longer for this longer chassis though. I wonder if this is going to end up getting bent like it does on the X-Max. Pulling off this brand new rear skid, we can also take a look at the new wheelie bar. This is a 2-piece design, which is pretty interesting to see. From here on in, this is all Traxxas Max though. All right, guys, so this is pretty interesting. Unlike on the Max, the chassis actually goes over the rear module here, so I can't just pull this cover off from the bottom. I think I'm gonna have to pull this entire rear module out to access the center differential. So I guess ease of disassembly is one of the prices we're gonna be paying for this low center of gravity design. This will give us a better look at that spur gear. Yep, that's a sintered steel spur gear on the same push drive we're used to seeing. And finally, there's the center differential. Unfortunately, it took many screws to get there. I do not envy you if you're doing this with hand tools. The main difference between this differential and the one in the Max is this one has an aluminum housing. I'm a little curious as to why they didn't use the upgraded aluminum housing that's already available for the Max. Let's dig into this a little bit further and see if we can figure it out. Inside here, what's primarily different between this and the upgraded aluminum center differential that is already available for the Max is that there are steel inserts behind the side gears, and I suspect the reason for that is that they are running thinner center differential fluid, and they expect there to be a lot more heat and friction inside here, and they were either concerned with or found that the side gears were eating up that aluminum housing. That's the only reason why I can think they did this, because this costs them more money than just using the aluminum housing that was already available. That being said, the front and rear differentials are the same part numbers that are on the Traxxas Max. These are pretty durable on 4S. I'm really curious to see how they handle 6S and maybe 8S. Speaking of which, I can't wait to test this thing out, so I'm gonna get this mess put back together. If you get as excited as I do to see all the new parts on these new models, make sure you get subscribed, because we're doing that here all the time. She is all back together. Let's drop a battery in this beast, take it out, see how fast it is, take it for a blast, and when we come back, I'm gonna tell you my thoughts on this versus the two Mojave options you have. These tires are really slick out of the box, so before we do a speed run, let's just... That'll do it. Let's get an on-road top speed run first. Pretty stable. One more pass. All right, let's check it out. 55 miles an hour, that's not too bad. I expected this thing to try and take off, so I guess those air vents are working in the back. Just how much slower is a truck off-road than it is on-road? Let's find out. One more pass. All right, let's check it out. 45 miles an hour, that's about what I expected, and a pretty big difference. Let's bash.
I'ma kick back when you fake like that. 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 I'ma kick back when you fake like that.
I've got my initial couple packs through this now, and if you're a Traxxas fanboy, you might want to look away, because I've got what might be a controversial opinion about this. Before I get into that, let me say, everything held up great. The body's looking fine. The body did not come off a single time in the bashing I was doing. Everything still looks good here. The chassis is still in perfect shape. No problems whatsoever. Tires look fine. However, as usual, I had one tire come unglued, so we'll have to fix that. Underside of the chassis looks good. No issues with it. Just a few scrapes and scratches, as you would expect. This 6S system has plenty of power, and at least in my testing, the motor stayed fairly cool. Unfortunately, so far, that's where the good stuff kind of ends. These tires are not that great. They don't seem to get good traction in basically any surface. The body that goes on here has a pretty big cage on it, and it is heavy, making this truck kind of top heavy, which makes it want to tip over. And ultimately, I think Traxxas has not been able to squeeze that Max DNA out of this thing. I've always said the Max kind of handles like a block of concrete. This one also kind of handles like a block of concrete. It's better than the Max, but it really should be. I'm not sure if Traxxas is depending on their stability management to even out the handling on this thing, but I don't run with stability management, and it was a handful the entire time I was driving it. And that's an issue because this thing directly competes with the 4S and the 6S Mojave. It's a little bit bigger than the 4S and a little bit smaller than the 6S and more expensive than both of them. At this time, unless you really love the way this thing looks or must have the clipless body system, I'm not seeing a lot of reason to buy this over one of those two vehicles. That being said, I've got a lot of things planned for this and I want to hear from you. Let me know what you want to see me do with this truck and I'll take care of it in one of the next videos. Make sure you get subscribed, then check out one of these.